In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. Some people have asked me, why do I open up my programs in the tradition of Malcolm X? It is a very simple reason for which I do so. Brother Malcolm X stood for truth, and he stood for authenticity, and he was sincere, and he was a martyr for the cause of justice for American descendants of slaves, and indeed all oppressed people in the world. We know what his traditions were. I need not go into that. But one thing that he said as he tried to establish his new organization before he was assassinated is that we've got to have a way for all of us, no matter what our faith orientation is, to come together and focus on the immediate problems that are affecting all of us, and to understand that without that central unity of consciousness, of common interest, we do not stand a chance to overcome the many obstacles which are set before us and which have always been, more or less, the defined struggle of our lives. Now, today, wide and deep fault lines are noticeably crisscrossing the face of nations worldwide. Societies everywhere are economically, politically, medically, and environmentally unstable, and increasingly so. But so too are the lives of their peoples. They are proportionately unstable, and increasingly so. We are in what the great historian Arnold Toynbee described as a time of troubles, and indeed, the few remaining civilizations that have lasted, some dating back 5,000 years, are teetering on the brink of collapse, falling over the square. And the question that I pose to you is, what shall we do? What shall American descendants of slavery do? The last report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said, and I quote, "The next few years are probably the most important in human history." And I'd like all of us to dwell on the significance and the depth and the importance of that quotation. And what it means is that our lives are going to be subject to great upheavals, unparalleled in history. They warned that a global average temperature above 1.5 degrees Celsius will be the tipping point, the point of no return for increasingly catastrophic social disintegration in the United States and throughout the world. The majority of us, descendants of African slavery, and I want you to look at this map closely, the majority of us live in about 17 southern states. Close to 90%, somewhere between 85 and 90% of us live in 17 southern states. And I've uploaded discussions before, years ago, that the southern states will suffer the most and first due to climate change and general social disintegration. Look at this map. you can see that I have marked off the zones, and you can see them quite clearly here. 30 degrees north latitude and 20 degrees south latitude. Everything in between those orange lines are going to experience first increased temperatures and humidity that will make many of those regions uninhabitable for human life, and will also make them vulnerable, open to vector-borne diseases. A vector is a carrier of bacteria and or viruses, many of which can cross over into the human community. So we're talking about fleas and ticks carried by rats, bats, and birds, animal waste, mosquitoes, and that is the one that we should pay close attention to most of all. The southern states will be overwhelmed with mosquito populations numbering in the hundreds of millions because of the increased humidity, along with dry heat. It will make those habitats very suitable for them to reproduce and feed on human blood. Mosquitoes will carry the viruses which cause yellow fever. Zika virus will be carried along with West Nile Valley virus, malaria, dengue, elephantiasis, and many other diseases which now plague people in South America, Mexico, Central America. Those will be common plagues in the southern states of the United States, where, again, remember, 85% to 90% of African Americans live today in those 17 states. Some mosquitoes have large bites. They make large bites, which can inject viruses or bacteria. It's already happening. It will happen more frequently year after year. Climate, your climate, is going to change radically wherever you live in the United States. Don't be in denial about what the science is saying. The most important strategic thinking you can be doing today is how to gain a kind of unity of consciousness and action based on a plan, a logical plan, to make moves on the square so that you will survive. Now, let me show you some projections done by a major United States University Environmental Science Department. I'd like you to look at these because they're projections that clearly demonstrate the kind of climate, the kind of weather that cities today will have in 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years from now, this century. And most of you will be alive, especially if you're in your 30s and below. Look at Los Angeles. Los Angeles will have weather that is very much what is experienced in southern Baja California in Mexico. Look at Texas, Houston, Texas. They will have climate that is pretty much what is now the case off of the Gulf of Mexico, in Mexico. Look at Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia will have the kind of weather which is now characteristic of the Gulf part of Alabama and Mississippi. And that means more humidity and dry heat combined. Look at New York City. New York City will have weather which is pretty much what is experienced in Arkansas today. A vast change from what in winter is a cold, cold climate to what will no doubt be a climate that is 9.1 degrees Fahrenheit warmer and 20.8% drier. And that climate also will be conducive to vector-borne diseases. And what we ought to be thinking now is how, in advance, to strategically mitigate health problems that we will suffer then if we find ourselves locked in climate zones that become deadly to us. Your climate is just simply going to change. And there's nothing that you can do about it, nothing that government can do about it. Those were just a few samples of cities which can become uninhabitable within 1 or 2 decades. Most of you, again, I say, will be alive. And many of you will die, just like thousands of African Americans are dying disproportionately due to COVID-19. In part because of discrimination, but also in part because of underlying medical conditions that could have been prevented had they had a different or lived a different lifestyle. The question is, will you fail to change your lifestyle and your false consciousness about what the priorities in your life ought to be right now, not just as an individual, but as a group of dispossessed people from the beginning, from the foundation of this nation? Estimates are that about 108.4 billion human beings have lived and died before us on this planet since we appeared as a species. There are now about 7.5 and growing to 8, assuming that the current rate of growth continues to be positive, soon to be 8 billion, and by 2050, 9 billion. We are right now, population-wise, the 7%ers. Most hominid species that you see here are extinct. You see, we're not the only human beings that have ever lived on this planet. We are one species of the hominid species, the hominid genus. And we are last on the list, as you can see, dating back, I would say, much farther back in time than the 200,000 years mentioned here, more like 400,000 years, maybe longer. But that's not the point that I'm trying to make here. We are last on the cut list. We are last on nature's cut list. And just as all of those hominid species before us have gone extinct, understand, we may be unique, but we are not special. And nature will cut us and move on if we are not circumspect, if we do not make changes on the square that mitigate the severe damage that is being done to us and that will be done to us in the future if we do not change. If American descendants of slaves do not start having that right conversation, the right conversation on strategic planning, then most, if not all, of us will be dead by 2040. And you can write that down and put it in an envelope and wait if you want proof. And open it in 40 years if you can. Now that's about 20 years from now. Maybe the death rate of American descendants of slaves due to COVID-19 is making some of you aware of that probable reality in store for us. But some of us can survive. It will require us, though, to make radical changes in our lifestyles, how we eat, how we relate to one another. It will require us to leave some people behind and to carry others forward with us. We are in a time of troubles, far, far above your individual life interests in celebrity matters, in hocus pocus history. You are confronted with a challenge that will require you to make history, not dwell in the past, on civilizations that have long died. Your toolbox must have in it all the tools requisite for making changes to give birth to a culture of values, actions that will increase our chance in a terribly imbalanced societal situation, imbalanced against us. Some of you like to talk about Africa. Some of you like to talk about the Egyptians and other cultures on the continent of Africa. You have very little, if any, cultural identity, however, with them. You speak English. Your whole indoctrination from childhood has been Eurocentric. And though you may break away and come out of that box, which is good, you are still in the matrix of a culture defined by other than you. And you will conform to their rules because you have no power, either politically nor financially, to break free and establish your own culture defined by you, your own social reality. I want to leave you with this thought, and I would like you to dwell on it as deeply as you can. There is one overarching principle which described all of the cultures in the past that you tend to want to spend so much time reflecting on and not paying attention to the present problems you face. There is an overarching principle that does connect us. And I'm not talking about genetics, because most of us are not pure African, and you know why. I want to go deeper. We have a connection. And it describes our lives as it described the lives of people who lived in Africa thousands of years ago, who built the pyramids. And it will continue to do so. In fact, this principle that I'm going to talk shortly on, it governs the entire universe, except for dark matter. It is the principle or principles of growth and decay, generation and corruption. All substances are subject to this principle. whether it be a rock or a mega star in another galaxy. All substances are subject to the principle of generation and corruption. Do you want to know what your rate of growth is, or what your rate of corruption is, your rate of decay? Do you want to know what our rate of growth is, or our rate of decay? What our rate of income decay is? What our rate of death and birth are? What our rate of unemployment is? And how fast, or what period of time, how close are we in time to zero? The question now that you are confronted with is this: do you want to decay? Do you want to die as a people? As a people. And we understand that each of us will die, but do you want our unique collective presence on this planet to disappear? Make the wrong collective choices and you are going to disappear as a unique presence on this planet. On the contrary, do you want to regenerate and grow? Sire children who take their place on this planet and preserve the continuity of our uniqueness. Meet the new challenges and overcome them. If so, then you will at least have a chance, which is all that every life form has, is a chance, more or less, together, but not alone. Together, but not individually. We can have a chance to preserve and continue our unique presence on this planet. And that is the number one priority that should be firmly established in your consciousness. And you should be willing to do all things to alter your lifestyle to make that more likely than not. Never say that you have not been warned. Never say that you didn't know that our situation is deadly, deadly serious. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.